Hi, everyone. I'm Kendra Mosley here on schedule, a little 1 minute late, and just checking to make sure that everything is working. Yes, it is. I see everybody on screen. Okay. So welcome to Live Thursday with Children in the Fields campaign. I'm Kendra Mosley. I work for the Association of Farm Worker Opportunity Programs. I'm here with two special guests, Kerri Lack and Jaydee Hanson. And I need to put the full title up there. Bear with me for a second. There you go. Okay. So everyone who is joining us and watching, please put your name in the chat box. Tell us where you're from. And we're happy to have you. If you have any questions about food safety and the coronavirus, they might be answered by the questions that we have prepared ahead of time, but feel free to put them in the chat window for now. And if we do not answer it, we will make sure to answer it at the end. So stay tuned for the Q&A. We'll be here for about an hour. So just feel free to settle back, get your headphones in. And I also want to let you know about the contest. Every week I put this on the screen and I hope that someone will see it and share. So there you go. Our contest is for migrant and seasonal farm worker children between the ages of 10 and 18 years old. It has several different categories and possibilities to win a scholarship and also a tablet. So make sure you go to that website, afop.org/CIF for details, guidelines. You must use the 2020 application to win. So please check that out. It's a great opportunity. And the contest closes on July 15th. We also want to thank everyone who has participated in Live Thursdays up until now. It's been a fun way to connect the community, the farm worker community, as well as the advocate community, and to share, all of our experiences, our insights and tips also in helping farm workers, especially right now with the coronavirus hitting rural communities really hard. So today our topic is food safety. These days, grocery shopping has taken on an added dimension of danger. We're extra cautious when we go to the store. There's new procedures like one-way lanes, and a lot of people are getting their groceries delivered. We've heard that the coronavirus germ can survive on plastic surfaces for up to 3 days, but we can't leave food outside in our cars or on our doorsteps for that long. It'll spoil. So that's why we've invited two special guests to talk about this and tell us, how best to manage our food at this time, because it's something that's ongoing. We don't have a vaccine. We just have to find a way to live with it. So welcome to Kerri and to Jaydee.
Thank you so much for inviting.
We're happy to have you.
Likewise, thank you.
And if you're listening and there's any problems with the audio or the video, go ahead and send that into the chat box so I can see it. We've had a few issues on our end this morning. Our two panelists can't actually hear one another. So there'll be a little bit of translating going on my part. So please bear with us. This is not always perfect. In fact, it's usually not. So I want to introduce our panelists properly. Jaydee Hanson is the Policy Director at the Center for Food Safety. He's responsible for the center's work related to food safety, as well as effects on food safety caused by industrial agriculture, pesticides, antibiotic resistance, and genetic engineering. He represents the Center on the Safe Food Coalition and the National Organic Coalition. His master's in biography and resource management is from the University of Hawaii. During the time of the COVID pandemic, he's been working out of his home and has more time to work on his yard and garden and tend to his compost pile. And Kerri Lack is the Deputy for Field Operations at PathStone Corporation's New Jersey office, based in Vineland, where the Garden State gets its nickname. She manages the National Farm Worker Jobs Program team, which provides training and employment services to migrant and seasonal farm workers seeking more stable and lucrative opportunities for themselves and their families. Through the NFJP grant, PathStone also provides related assistance to farm workers and community services such as pesticide training to growers. So Kerri, I think I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us, just to start, a little bit about PathStone and the services that you provide?
Sure, absolutely. So PathStone provides a number of different programs to help the most vulnerable in the communities that we serve in 7 states as well as Puerto Rico. And there are a variety of different programs in addition to the farm worker grant, ranging from education programs, GED, teaching English, also work in re-entry from incarceration programs, senior citizen programs, housing programs, do a lot of different work in different communities. But as you mentioned, the program that I work with in New Jersey is the National Farm Worker Jobs Program, which is a federal grant. It's funded by the U.S. Department of Labor, and the goal is to provide training and employment services to migrant and seasonal farm workers. And that takes a number of different forms. We work directly through outreach with the farm workers. If they have a need, for example, a medical problem, we will go and take care of that very specific need one-on-one. Then we also provide training opportunities to farm workers, which also serve the growers. For example, what we call an agricultural upgrade. If a farm worker desires training, for example, to get a commercial driver's license and do additional higher level work on the farm, we would do that. For farm workers, however, who desire additional education, or perhaps to transition into a different career that would be more stable year-round, or more potentially lucrative to provide for a family, PathStone provides the training and employment and job placement for that farm worker to maybe move into town, and also the related assistance, housing, food, utilities, transportation, to bring that farm worker and his or her family and dependents also to a new life. In addition, we work with businesses in the community, providing the well-trained and pre-screened employees that they need. And then to bring it back to what we're discussing today, we work with the growers to provide the training that they're required on an annual basis to have. Pesticide safety, working with hazardous chemicals, preventing heat-related illness, and of course, food safety. So this time of year, as they're bringing in new farm worker employees, we go on site to the farms and we provide free of charge the training that they need in terms of making sure that their farming and harvesting seasons are conducted in a safe manner.
Great, thank you, Kerri. I want to acknowledge that Jennifer Sheehan, the Health and Safety Committee Chair for APOP, is on the live stream. So hi, Jennifer. We work with Jennifer a lot, and we really appreciate her support. Jaydee Hanson, can you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us what Center for Food Safety is all about?
Yes, I'm Jaydee Hanson. I'm the Policy Director at the Center for Food Safety. When there's not a pandemic, we have an office in Washington, D.C. that I work out of. We are a membership organization. We have approximately 1 million members around the U.S. and some in Canada as well. We are very concerned about all aspects of food and food growing and development. We are working carefully now on trying to make sure that the public policy discourages people in the workplace from getting COVID virus. We have been a leader in food safety. In fact, we had to sue the Food and Drug Administration to get them to implement the Food Safety Modernization Act, which we did succeed in winning at the court, and actually 3 different times as they failed to do different aspects of what they're supposed to do under the law. But we have worked also on genetic engineering and pesticides. our lawyers recently won a lawsuit ordering the EPA to remove its registration of an herbicide called dicamba. So that's probably enough to give a, yeah.
I mean, good work. Not congratulations. The work
Yeah.
isn't done yet, but yeah, and we shared that on our page. We're really happy about, I mean, we're very excited that you are doing that work because dicamba is a very dangerous pesticide, and it's been well documented how much the pesticide can drift onto
Well,
other.
it kills plants and damages people. That's what pesticides are intended to do. They're poisons.
And I know we're here to talk about food safety, but can you say really quickly more about the pesticide and your work on that?
Well, our scientists and our lawyers have done a lot of work on pesticides. We have been for some time challenging the registration of new plants that are genetically engineered to accept to tolerate the use of herbicides like glyphosate, sold as Roundup by Monsanto, but also dicamba and other chemicals. What we have, unfortunately, is an industrial agricultural system that breeds through genetic engineering plants that help promote pesticides. And so rather than figuring out how we can grow more plants with fewer pesticides, we're growing more plants with even more pesticides now.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's a vicious cycle, it sounds like.
Well, it is a vicious cycle, and because of the tremendous secrecy that is allowed companies, we don't see the health and safety data that they're giving to the Environmental Protection Agency until people get sick and sue and go to court. And then through traditional discovery, we're learning that the companies knew for a long time how dangerous to people these chemicals are. So it's a special problem for farm workers and their whole community that are almost literally bathed in these chemicals.
Kerri, can you actually tell us a story that PathStone, New Jersey came across of the gentleman that was sprayed?
Yes, we did. We had a farm worker who came to us for assistance because he had been exposed to a large amount of pesticide that affected him basically from the chest down torso area. And he had developed a very severe rash reaction as a result of that. And unfortunately, in that case, the grower was, one of the unfortunate situations where he was not really taking good care of the workers and really invested in their health and safety, and did not provide medical care when requested to do so. Basically sent someone to get him a tube of anti-itch cream, and that was it. Did not assist him with obtaining medical care in a proper way. So we were approached and brought into that situation, and by that time it had really affected him pretty severely. Fortunately, we were able to enroll him in our program because at the same time he was looking for other types of assistance as well. We got him medical care. We took him to the ER. He finally did receive proper medical care for the pesticide exposure, and through that also discovered that he had other underlying medical conditions as well, which we were able to assist him in obtaining treatment for. And that really ended up being a great success story because he later was able to obtain training and employment. Now he's working in a warehouse. He has an apartment. He's doing very, very well. He's got follow-on medical care and he's really doing quite well.
That's great to hear. Thank you for sharing that story. I'm just going to do a quick check-in. Jaydee, can you still hear Kerri?
I can still hear Kerri.
Okay, you're still not able to hear Jaydee, right?
I still can't hear him.
Okay.
I have to keep remembering that, so I keep waiting for you. Okay, so on to food safety. Kerri, can you just give us a brief description of what food safety is and the training that you all provide for farm workers?
So for our purposes, the food safety training that we do really encompasses a couple of areas. In terms of what we talk to the farm workers about is their part in making sure that the food that originates on the farms is harvested and maintained and processed in a safe manner when it leaves the farm. So it starts out in a safe manner, and that we can educate them also for their consumption on the farm and for their family's sake as well. So basically, when we talk about food safety, we're talking about three different things that we want to keep in mind. The first one is dirt, because obviously no one really wants to eat dirt. The second one is pesticide residue, because that is a factor. And the third one is foodborne illness, microorganisms that could be on the produce. And so a lot of times we get the question, well, what if it's organic? So even if it is organically grown, you still have the dirt and the possible microorganisms, even if you don't have necessarily the pesticide exposure. So those are the three factors that we are concerned about when we talk about making sure that we wash and clean produce, and we can get into that as well. But the training that we do for the farm workers, we want to make sure that we talk to them about being observant, first of all, and their stake in why it matters to them to be aware of what they're seeing on the farm. So that's something that's important to me when I teach food safety to the farm workers, is making that connection of why it should matter to them, because this is their job and their livelihood, and telling them that, look, if there is an outbreak of foodborne illness and the farm is shut down by the government, you're going to lose all those days or weeks of your livelihood. And so that you need to be a partner with the grower and with the safety agencies to make sure that you speak up and you look out for the safety factors as much as you can. Looking for things such as animal droppings, bird droppings. If you see anything like that in the fields, you need to call that to the attention of your supervisor, because that can be a risk factor. Looking for cleanliness. Is the equipment clean? Is the harvesting containers clean? Making sure that you notice these things. If you see any extensive bruising or damaging on the produce, that would be something that you would want to call out to your supervisor. So noticing those things and partnering with the grower. Personal hygiene is something really big that we focus on with the farm workers as well. And there are rules in place to make sure that the farm workers have access to bathroom facilities, to soap and running water, to single-use paper towels for drying their hands, and just going over with them the importance of utilizing those things while they are on the job. There is, and maybe Jaydee will speak to this, there is a policy aspect to this too, though, because in some areas where farm workers don't have paid sick time, for example, that can be a real disincentive for farm workers to take the time off when they are sick. And if a farm worker has a potentially contagious illness, such as a stomach virus, the advice would be, from a food safety perspective, they should not be coming to work and handling produce. But if that is their livelihood and they don't have paid sick leave, then that can really be a disincentive to taking the time off and calling out of work. So just talking about proper personal hygiene. If you have a cut, if you have a rash, if you have some type of an infection that is oozing, making sure that that's covered, making sure that that's bandaged, and going over proper skills, personal hygiene skills in that regard while working on the farm and working around produce. We also, of course, talk about pesticide residue, and I think, did you want me to talk about some of the exercises that we do to show that?
I'm gonna real quick just welcome Jaydee back. Sorry we lost you for a second there, Jaydee.
Found you again.
Good. Thank you for hanging in there with us. It's been a pretty interesting day so far. Hopefully everyone can see and hear everybody still. But I want to welcome some more folks that joined us. Rachel Salazar from Plainview, Texas, and Claudia Rogenhofer, Letty, Paloma Bravo, Annette Ipac-Galante. We're so happy to have you all join us. And I think the question burning in everyone's minds and what we're here to really answer is the coronavirus. So Jaydee, let's just, call out the elephant in the room and talk about it. Can the coronavirus be spread? Let me see what my exact question was supposed to be. Can the coronavirus be spread through food, including refrigerated or frozen food?
According to the Center for Disease Control, the answer is probably no. They don't have good data showing that the coronavirus on food can be spread through eating the food, at least. To the extent, the coronavirus is a virus that infects your breathing passages. And so to the extent that there might be someone who sneezed on food or had other, had tasted food, and you didn't know that it had been tasted, there is a risk, but the risk is more to the people preparing the food, especially in kitchens where, commercial kitchens where you're working very close together, or there is some possibility of the packaging that food comes in. You mentioned earlier that it can survive on plastic for several days. It can survive on cardboard for several days. The important thing about handling food and eating it is wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. And then, farm workers have particular challenges. Their housing is often inadequate. Where they're preparing meals is often inadequate. Their working conditions often have them working very close to each other. And when you're out in the field and have 100-degree temperature, it's pretty hard to keep your mask on all the time. So that's a real challenge. Other workers that work in slaughterhouses, right now we have the U.S. Department of Agriculture increasing line speeds to the point that workers, whether it's chicken or pork or soon beef, are going to have carcasses coming by them faster and faster. And so even if they put on face masks, even if they put on shields, the U.S. Department of Agriculture says those face masks need to be changed every 4 hours. The shields are going to fog up. So you've got a real possibility that we're seeing play out in real time in where meatpacking and poultry plants, where huge numbers of workers are getting ill, and then they're sharing housing and going home and getting their family sick. So that's the food safety problem with COVID, is that our workers are being exposed and are exposing each other. It's not so much a problem for the consumer, but it is a problem for the worker.
Kerri, just to translate, it's wash your hands, wash your hands. It's more of a problem Jaydee just said about the farmers themselves who are in the processing plants that we should be concerned about. So thank you, Jaydee, for that. And I'll go back to Kerri on how we should go about cleaning the food that we purchase. what is the best practice there?
So the best practices that we usually teach, definitely all produce needs to be washed every time. And usually plain water will do it. There are a lot of places that will say you need to buy this fancy produce wash, or you need to use some sort of baking soda rinse. I mean, there are a lot of things that you'll read, and you can try all these different things. But normally, water is fine, but running water, clean, cold running water. It should be cold. Hot water can allow microorganisms to seep through the stem. So definitely you want it to be cold, clean running water. And you do want to, hold the fruit or vegetable under the water. If it is a root vegetable growing under the ground, or something with a firm skin, like a melon, something like that, you can use a vegetable brush and have some friction on it. Otherwise, just using your hands to give it a little rub like that should be sufficient. The exceptions, we usually teach berries, because there sometimes can be a greater risk of microorganisms. You can put those in a colander and have some running water over those. Leafy greens, they do recommend removing the outer leaves and putting them in a bowl with cold water and kind of swirling them around to make sure that you remove everything that is inside. But generally, that should be sufficient, as long as you do apply some friction, again, with your hands for most things, with a vegetable brush for root vegetables, and firm-skinned things that would allow, and then the berries and leafy greens, just having a little more swirling in the water, but cold, clean water. We do recommend cleaning them. You want to wash them as close to the time of consumption as possible. If you wet the produce and then put it away for storage, that gives a breeding ground for mold and other microorganisms that could be on there. So you don't want to do your shopping, come home and wash everything and then put it away. You want to just put it in storage and then wash it right before you're going to consume it.
Good to know. I'm going to remind our viewers that we have a blog, and one went up this week about food safety, and Melanie, the director of AFAP Health and Safety and Children in the Fields campaign, put together the blog with a lot of helpful tips on all of this. So go to afaphealthandsafety.wordpress.com and you'll see the blog. And I wanted to just ask a little bit of a provocative question, but Kerri, is it like, should we be using soap or anything like that to wash our produce?
Well, that, like I mentioned, you don't really have to. Water is generally considered, I mean, by the most of the organizations that research this have said that cold, clean running water is sufficient. There really isn't a need to use anything else. You will find people who say that you can do a baking soda rinse. That's not an official recommendation, but we don't teach that in our, in terms of our certified food safety classes. We teach that, cold, clean running water is sufficient. I wouldn't officially recommend anything other than that, but certainly there are other people who say that, baking soda or the produce rinses and things like that, but generally,
no soap, right?
No soap. No, I wouldn't use anything else. That's not the official recommendation.
Don't put anything on your produce that you yourself don't want to actually eat, right?
Just the cold, clean running water, as as we've said, is the best option for that. But I would say use soap on your hands. You should always wash your hands first. I definitely would say use soap on your hands. Wash your hands before you handle your produce, but just the clean water, as we've said, on the produce itself.
Great, thank you. So Jaydee, over to you. I have a whole list of questions, and I'm not sure if I can get through them all for you, but I wanted to make sure I hit the most important points. What measures do you know of that the FDA and CDC, et cetera, are taking to ensure that we remain able to address foodborne illness outbreaks during this pandemic?
Well, one of the things that, both of them have a hazardous assessment set of guidelines called HACCP for short. They are urging processing facilities to continue doing that. They, while they're not doing the number of inspections we think they should. They are continuing to do inspections, but not as many. So it's really important on the producer to follow those hazardous risk reduction guidelines. The other thing that is a problem is that so much of our produce in the U.S. is grown right near concentrated animal feeding operations. So one of the things that farm workers in the field need to pay attention to is that no waste or no water that comes off of a chicken operation or a pig or a cattle operation gets onto the field that's growing produce. That's one of the things that the inspectors have a hard time with. The Food and Drug Administration has finally admitted that the Yuma Valley E. coli in lettuce scandal of a year or so ago was caused by water from a huge feedlot, 100,000 cows a month. Another outbreak was caused by runoff from fields where cattle were kept. So one of the things farm workers can do is, they know who's working where and what's going on near them, and they need, when something is going wrong, the farm workers themselves become a good detection source. Going back to not food safety on the farm or in the meat packing plant, but in your home, the one thing that Kerri didn't mention is I'm a real stickler on having separate cutting boards. You need to make sure that your meat is always cut up and handled separately from any of the rest of your meal, because that's going to be the biggest, most likely source of pathogens in the home setting.
So Kerri, just to let you know, Jaydee said that the biggest source of contamination for foodborne illness is the feedlots that are right next to vegetable growing operations, and that the latest outbreak of E. coli was from a feedlot in Yuma. You said Yuma, Arizona, I think.
The Yuma, Arizona one was a feedlot. The one in Salinas, California was cattle being raised nearby and contaminating the reservoir.
Another one was in Salinas, where the feedlot of cattle was contaminating the reservoir. So apologies for everyone that I'm repeating what Jaydee just said, but it's for Kerri's benefit. The audio isn't completely connected. And the other point was that we need to keep our cutting boards separate. One cutting board for meat, one for vegetables. So that's a very good point. It's something I don't currently do, so it's something I'll start doing. And so just to keep going, should we, how about so I hear a lot about like the farm workers and what they can do to speak up and point out, problems that might arise. I want to mention though that farm workers are often at a disadvantage when it comes to like whistleblowing. They can be fired out of hand because a lot of them don't have documents. So what can employers do to help their employees, and make sure that there's no cross contamination? I think that's the question is for Kerri.
And I'm sorry, could you repeat that? What can employers do?
Employers do. Because the question actually is about employers and employees. We've heard a lot about what farm workers can do. I'm concerned that the farm workers themselves don't feel empowered to take those steps because there could be retaliation.
Well, I would answer that in two ways. One thing is what we do, and one thing they can do is partner with us. But I would say, first of all, that's where organizations like PathStone, nonprofits like us, can come in before we even get to the employer part. Is that's one of the things that we do is advocate for the farm workers. So the farm workers have us as a resource to advocate for them. So if they ever don't feel comfortable approaching their employers, they can always come to us, and we will advocate for them. So one of the things that we do when we do our outreach is we tell them, if you have any problem, if you have a personal problem, if you have medical needs, if you have legal needs, if you have anything that's going on that you need some assistance with, we will help you with referrals. We can help you, put you in touch with the correct people. So if there is a concern and they need to speak to a doctor, a lawyer, someone from OSHA, someone from whatever organization might be able to assist them with their concern, we can act as an intermediary and put them in contact with the correct person. And sometimes maybe it is just as simple as approaching the employer, the farmer, the grower, and saying, this was a concern that was expressed to us. Can you help us out with figuring out what the issue might be? And we can sort of act as a go-between, because we help both. We assist the growers with these sorts of trainings, and we assist the farm workers as well. So we can act as a go-between in that sense. But what the employers can do, what the growers can do, is really what hopefully they do, most of them in our area, the majority of them are really great to their workers. We do have the occasional unfortunate situation like the one I mentioned earlier, but by and large, we see that there are some really great growers in the area here who take very good care of their farm workers. And most of the time, if they just tell them to, they have an open door policy. If they can just have some ability to give feedback and just say, hey, if you see something, if there's an issue, if there's a problem, just come to me, come to your supervisor, if there's a crew leader, or if there's someone, if there's a language barrier, if there's someone who speaks the language, or someone who they can go to and express those concerns to without that fear of retaliation, then just letting them know that they're on the same side, and that they're working together as they should be, because the more success the farm has, the better for everyone, because if the grower has success on the farm, then he can keep a larger staff and give them more hours and keep them coming back each season.
Definitely. Jaydee, so for the employees, and you had mentioned that the processing plants, meatpacking plants are the areas of highest concern, and we've seen that they've also had the biggest impact from COVID. So how do they maintain social distancing in those facilities and retail establishments where employees typically work within really close distances? And I anticipate that you'll say something about don't increase the line speeds, right?
Well, it was a real travesty that line speeds were being increased right as the pandemic hit. And then President Trump, even as we were seeing large numbers of workers in meatpacking plants becoming ill, ordered them to stay open without ordering, without the federal government, saying, okay, to the companies, we will make sure you've got enough money to get everybody good personal protective gear. We will make sure that sick workers get paid. So what we need for all workers is paid sick leave. When you have something as contagious as the COVID virus, you need workers that are ill not being in the plant. You need workers to be able, when they get sick, not to pass it on to their families. That we don't have now. We have, again, fast line speeds, but fast line speeds with inadequate protective gear. The U.S. Department of Agriculture recently estimated in a meeting with some of us that it would cost an operation about $1,000 a day for the personal protective gear that they need.
Mm.
And that's an unbudgeted expense for these meat packers, even if they're huge ones like Tyson's and Smithfield. And rural people in rural communities need to understand that the folks working in the meatpacking plants also live in your community, so they're going to spread it to others in your community.
Mhm.
So it's not just farm workers or meat packing plant owners, but it's the communities where these are located that need to be advocating for better safety conditions for the workers and better leave policies.
And Kerri, Jaydee was saying that it costs these plants about $1,000 a day for them to provide the proper personal protective equipment that's needed, and just the main thing is to provide sick leave for workers. That is really the key piece. Is that a good enough of a summary, Jaydee?
Yeah.
There's a lot there, and that's why AFOP exists. That's why Center for Food Safety exists, and PathStone is because there's so much work left to be done on getting farm workers the things that they need to be safe and healthy. And we're seeing this play out in front of our eyes with a lot of the farm worker communities, that their testing is like 30% positive rate right now for the coronavirus. I was on a call with Migrant Clinicians Network yesterday, and the migrant stream right now is about to move north, and they're bracing themselves for the testing that's going to happen to keep everyone healthy. It's a lot, so they're not sure they're going to have all the tests that they need. So yeah, go ahead.
We've seen that in New Jersey as well, that there have been pockets of farms that have been seriously affected in this area as well, and it's been very difficult when with housing in particular, in areas where farm workers typically are housed on the farms in grower provided housing. That's just a very difficult situation to deal with when there's no way to really quarantine and to distance when you have the population all housed together.
Yeah.
A tough situation.
I want to ask a question that might be pretty quick to answer. Is the coronavirus, when you eat food that might have the coronavirus on it, you've cleaned it, you've done all that you can to keep it out of your house, what happens when you ingest that? Do you know, Jaydee? Do you know the answer to that? Like, can you get that through your digestive system?
Well, the Center for Disease Control is saying, to the best of their knowledge, no. You need to breathe in this virus. That's how you get it. Especially for cooked food, not a problem. For
Uh-oh. Jaydee, we lost you. Oh, there you are. Uh-oh, now I can't hear you. Jaydee, I can't hear you.
Oh no.
Do you want to get off and come back on? All right, so we'll wait for Jaydee to come back. And while we do, Kerri, I'm not sure if I've touched on all the questions I was planning to ask you. Let me see here.
It's such a shame. This worked so perfectly during rehearsal yesterday.
I know. We used up all of our luck yesterday.
We did. What about what did we cover?
There you are. Can you hear me?
All right. Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Kerri, go ahead and say something.
Can you still hear me?
I can hear you.
I can hear you, Kerri.
You can?
I can hear Kerri.
Kerri, can you hear him?
I still can't hear him.
Okay.
Back to what we were before. Okay, so nothing has gotten worse, at least.
Well, I mean, one of the things, we're waiting for a vaccine for the coronavirus. However, as we're experiencing problems with telecommunications today, our telecommunications, we've been using it for 120 years and haven't quite figured out how to make it work right 100% of the time. And what we know from vaccines is we will be really excited if they work right about 60% of the time.
Really?
So we are going to have to implement a lot of these basic safety practices. They are, the good news is some of the practices will carry over into regular food safety. Washing your hands, making sure that, the packaging is safe, goes right over to salmonella. I mean, even after this is done, this pandemic is over, we still have more than 3,000 people a year dying from salmonella, and that is preventable, a lot more preventable than it is. And we've got meat packers, or meat growers that won't vaccinate their animals. We've got chickens that where there aren't being vaccinated, even though there are vaccines for them. So we need to develop a vaccine for COVID, but we also need to use the vaccines that are available for salmonella already.
Kerri, Jaydee was saying that we lose 3,000, you said 3,000 people a year die from salmonella. So these practices that we're implementing and becoming more strict about because of COVID will help other foodborne illnesses from being spread. So that is a good thing. We're finding our thin silver linings to all of this. And then the vaccine, it will, like you said, it'll take a while to be distributed, and everyone's pretty much looking forward to 2021 for that happening. So we have a long slog ahead of us to just coexist with this virus for now. And Jaydee was also saying the hand washing and the field sanitation practices that we've been, beating our drums about all along are even more important now. And I heard from the Coalition of Immokalee Workers that they themselves were not seeing anything or not enough anyways, being done. And they banded together and they got a lot of organizations on board. Like the firefighters come twice a day to fill up the hand washing station. They have a Center for Health, the county health, I forget the name, also there to help and to check on things. So it takes a lot of people working together to make this work, but there's still a lot more to be done. And we're right in the throes of the harvest season right now. It's June, so this is where it really counts. I wanted to talk about the bottleneck that we've seen in some of diagrams. We have the same amount of supply and the same amount of demand. That it's like an hourglass, but you have this bottleneck where the production can only go so fast because there's the workers that are getting sick, and so things are getting caught in that bottleneck, and they're having to slaughter pigs, they're having to dump milk, crops are having to get plowed under. Is that something that we're still seeing, Jaydee? Is that or is that improving at all?
There is some measure of improvement. I mean, one of the things that producers are realizing is, a lot of them had contracts for big grocery chains or for big food processing operations that were far away from where they are. And so you've got grocery stores in Florida where the Immokalee workers are importing tomatoes from Mexico while they're not able to sell the tomatoes they're growing there because of the contracting system. One of the again, I hope one of the silver linings in this is we will look more and more at ways to get more of our food from closer to us. It will taste better because it will be fresher, but and we'll spend less energy shipping it and refrigerating it, going 1,500 or 2,000 miles away, and that's a good thing. I mean, I get most of my vegetables from a local community-supported agriculture group. Right now, getting an awful lot of zucchini and squash, but and not so much lettuce because it's getting warm. But I think as we learn again how to eat more seasonally, there will be some diminishing of these bottlenecks. If we want strawberries 12 months of the year, then they're gonna have to be shipped long distances and not taste very good.
Yeah. So Jaydee's point is that we're all having to learn to do more locally, because that's where the bottleneck comes from, is that need to ship things out longer distances. And so Jaydee says he's with a community supported agriculture and is eating a lot of zucchini and squash right now, because that's what locally is in season. I have a little bit of lettuce in my garden, but it's not doing so well right now. It's hot. Yeah, and I want to open up the floor for questions from our audience. I also want to recognize Christine Colon. Kerri, I don't know if you know that name. I think she's with PathStone.
Samara.
So thank you for joining us, Christine. Gloria Zapata, De Leon Zapata is from Plainview, Met. Tammy Alston's from North Carolina. Lillian Bonilla is from Met, Minnesota. And Micaela Mijares Rascon is from Plainview, Texas. So welcome, a good cohort from Texas today. I'm going to check my list. Do you have any questions for each other? I know, Kerri, you can't hear Jaydee, but do you have any questions for one another?
I may later when I rewatch the broadcast.
No, oh, I did have a question about respirators and pesticides. So, farm workers often need to contend with the reality of pesticide exposure. But what does that mean for trying to avoid coronavirus? Is that a good thing to try to use a respirator, or does that complicate matters?
Well, for pesticide training, there are specific guidelines for each type of pesticide, and that's indicated on the label. So when we teach the pesticide safety, anything specific in terms of what kind of respirator or what kind of protection would be required for each pesticide would be specified on the label for that individual pesticide. So certainly, if you were already wearing some type of mask to prevent transmission of coronavirus, then if you needed some type of additional respirator on top of that for the pesticide, then that would only be additional protection on top of that. But
always read the label, right?
Yes, always read the label. Pesticides are very individualized, so that's what we teach in the pesticide safety. We go over the basics in terms of the important stuff that you need to know for any type of pesticide situation. But the key with that is that they're very individualized. There are some that you can re-enter an area where pesticide has been applied in 4 hours, and there are other ones where it's maybe 2 days that you have to wait to enter that area. There are different application rules. There are some that are in different forms. It may be aerated, it may be liquid. It's very variable, so have to read the label.
Mm-hmm. Jaydee, anything to add?
Well, I think one of the things, having grown up in a rural area where lots of pesticides were used, pesticides don't just stay right where they're being applied, and one of the important things is to make sure that the pesticides are used as minimally as possible. 2, that they stay on the field or ideally just on the crop, and that they not get into the water or the air. And that's a real challenge. You know, that's a serious challenge for communities. I was in the Delano area of California some years ago and asked an organic grower about groundwater. And he says, "Oh, I'm not using groundwater because it's so contaminated with pesticides that I'm afraid that some of my consumers wouldn't want to buy my organic grapes. So I'm just using surface water that comes down from the Sierras."
Wow.
You know, there are places that we've used so many pesticides for so long that it challenges even the groundwater.
Kerri, Jaydee just said that some organic growers that he spoke with personally in California do not use groundwater to water the crops because it's been so contaminated by pesticides that he only uses surface water that comes down from the Sierras. So that just gives us an idea of how prevalent pesticides are. And yeah, it's a problem. So that was actually my final question, was any specific precautions happening between organic farms versus conventional? Is there any difference there in how they're handling COVID or food safety in general?
Well, I think that to the extent that a lot of the organic operations who are raising chickens and beef and pork, some of those are going to smaller slaughterhouses, which have less of a problem. But anytime you're having workers work very closely together, you're going to have a problem, whether it's organic or non-organic meat. The issue is how closely the workers have to work together, and you know, ideally, you would find a meat packing plant that let everybody be 10 feet apart. But when you have line speeds that are moving animal carcasses so fast, if they're putting organic animals into that line speed, or if they're putting non-organic animals into that line speed, you're still going to have problems.
Jaydee said that it could make a difference in terms of the size of the meat packing plant that the organic chicken, for example, is being sent to, and the smaller plants have overall, I guess, better practices when it comes to employee safety, but just it's the line speeds that really matter. So that is just about our time. I want to say, give you an opportunity to say anything if you want to include any closing comments. I'll open up the floor for that.
Just thank you so much for inviting us to be here today. And yes, you already ran our website, PathStone.org, and please find us on Facebook as well. Specifically, we do have a PathStone New Jersey Facebook page as well. So if anyone is interested in reaching out to us later with additional questions, please feel free.
So that is PathStone's information. Jaydee.
Yes, the Center for Food Safety's website is centerforfoodsafety.org. On the website, we have.
Are you sure it's org? Yes.
It is .org. Yeah. On the website, we have a whole section on food safety and COVID that goes into more detailed things that I've said briefly. So please check us out. And we do have Instagram and Twitter and Facebook accounts. So just search for Center for Food Safety. You'll find us lots of places.
Sounds good. Thank you so much to both of you. I've really enjoyed having you on this week, and we look forward to working with you again in the future. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you to everyone for joining us today. Bye.
Bye.